Hi, everybody. My name is Maya. I'm an animal caregiver, and welcome to this year's conference. I'd like to introduce you to CJ, one of the best goats. When she first arrived, she was definitely a little skittish. It was really hard for me to be able to touch her. And now she is one of the most friendliest goats and will come up to you, try to get scratches. And if you stop, she might try to put your hand on you, but maybe not right now.
Hi, welcome to the Farmed Animal Conference e-Summit. I'm your host today, Kelsey Leach, calling in from our sanctuary in the beautiful Northern California. And we're so excited to introduce our next guest, Christopher Soul Eubanks. Christopher is a social justice advocate, creative, and public speaker who was raised in Atlanta, Georgia. He has dedicated himself to doing advocacy work that combats all forms of injustice. And after learning the horrors of animal exploitation, Christopher became vegan, began doing community organizing, and helped co-organize Atlanta's first ever animal rights march. Christopher is the founder of Apex Advocacy, a nonprofit animal rights organization that uses digital content and grassroots activism to help communities of color defend themselves against animal industries and fight for collective liberation. Welcome back to the Farmed Animal Conference e-Summit, Chris. We are so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much. I am glad to be here, glad that it is still going on, and I'm excited for this year.
Absolutely. We are excited too. I want to start by asking a fun question or ask what is your why for being vegan? What's your vegan story? What was the motivation initially that helped you make that change?
Absolutely. I think it's always interesting to hear everyone's story. It's like watching a movie at times, like watching a mini movie. But initially, I mean, I would say the roots of my vegan journey started when I was a teenager, and I transitioned slowly into a vegetarian diet when I was around 17 years old. But that was more so for diet. But I would say about 10 years in, I kind of felt like a weirdo and was like, oh, I'm out of place. Nobody I know is a vegetarian or vegan. So I started back eating animal products. And then I went through a bit of a life change where around 2014, I decided to leave my job in financing and just started to really discover the person that I wanted to be, take some time off. And I started to learn more about ethical veganism and animal advocacy after, I would say, watching Cowspiracy around 2016. I watched Cowspiracy and I just swore I was being such a really good environmentalist. And here I was learning that I was consuming animal products, which is extremely bad for the environment, as many of you all watching know. So I gave up animal products for dietary reasons, but I started to learn more about the ethical aspects of it as I started to research more. And I would say late 2016, early 2017 is when I started doing more advocacy work. So that's kind of my transition from vegetarianism to eating animals to veganism to activism.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you found that journey and that you found activism and veganism. And Cowspiracy is such a powerful film for people who haven't seen it. And I hear that often that helped people make that change. So I'm glad you found that film. So you spoke at our 2021 Farmed Animal Conference, and at the time you had recently launched your new organization, Apex Advocacy. I imagine it's been a very busy year for you. Can you tell us a bit about Apex Advocacy and the work you're doing?
Yeah, so Apex Advocacy, well, Apex is an acronym. The acronym is Animal Protection, Equality, Intersectionality. So we are an animal rights-based organization, but we also understand that the systems that oppress humans also oppress animals, non-human animals. So in our advocacy and our initiatives, we don't ignore that, especially since the people that are doing this work are actual humans. So
Yeah.
we can't ignore how those systems of oppression impact them too. So we kind of look at all of the advocacy and the initiatives that we partake through that lens. So I would say the last year has been about really trying to find our footing and establish ourselves and execute our initiatives. So we have three major projects that we're working on. Our first project was Black Vegan Everything. That was the initiative that launched Apex Advocacy. And that was kind of the initial inspiration, loose inspiration for Apex Advocacy. It was inspired by just wanting to create a space where Black-owned vegan businesses and Black-led vegan organizations could be celebrated and magnified. And I didn't want to do that just with me personally. Like, I didn't want that to be attached to my personal social media. I wanted to give it a platform where it could have a full backing and could be magnified in a proper way. So that, along with just doing advocacy work and not always feeling like there was the diversity in the movement that I thought should be there, or that I thought would be there when I started doing advocacy, not seeing as many Black and brown people as I would have thought.
Yeah.
I think those two things kind of led me to start this organization. So, like I said, Black Vegan Everything is our first initiative. So that's a website where you can go and look at all of these businesses and organizations that are Black owned, that are vegan, from restaurants to clothing companies, to body and beauty care products, to social justice organizations. I mean, it's a wide variety of businesses and organizations that have a vegan framework, that are fully vegan, that are doing a variety of things. So that's the first thing that we started out doing with the organization. Our next initiative is called No Backyard Slaughter. And this is a initiative helping to fight against backyard slaughterhouses in Black and brown and marginalized communities. A lot of times these backyard slaughterhouses are in these communities and people don't even know about them, and they're causing a lot of, they're just bringing down the quality of the neighborhood. So we're doing everything that we can to help these communities fight back against those instances. And our latest initiative is the Global Majority Caucus, which you and I were talking about earlier before the call started, where this was an initiative from the organization Encompass. And when Encompass dissolved, they asked if we would carry on their work. So the caucus is just a place where it's just a space for advocates of color to come and connect and to network and share community. And, you know, we have things like every month we do a community check-in where everyone who signs up for the caucus, and the caucus is totally free, can come and just, you know, talk about their experiences in animal advocacy and, you know, what they're going through. And we have a book club meeting every month. So, and we have a lot of other plans that we want to implement in the caucus going forward, but it's very new to Apex. We have only had it for about a couple of months. So we're still ironing out the details of what we want it to be in the future. So those are the three biggest things that we're working on with Apex. But essentially, Apex is, you know, here to help create more advocates of color in animal advocacy spaces. And this past year has just been getting our initiatives off the ground, me learning a lot about nonprofit or organizations and how they're run, and getting 501c3s and all of the things that I had no idea about until I started.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot.
that's what I've been.
Well, you have fit a lot in the past year, and the work that you're doing is incredible. And like you said, when you entered into the animal rights movement, you weren't seeing a lot of representation from Black and brown people. So you're creating that space, which is so needed in our movement. So the work you're doing is incredible. I want to talk about veganism. So veganism is often defined as a diet or lifestyle Now, as activists, we know it's much more than that. But can you explain the philosophy behind veganism?
Yeah, so I essentially feel that the philosophy behind veganism is doing everything you realistically and practically can to not contribute to any form of animal abuse or exploitation. And essentially, I'm starting to use the word anti-species more because
Mhm.
that really defines what veganism is about. I always say that veganism is the way we be anti-species. Just like if you were anti-racist, you would challenge your everyday behavior to not support any form of racism or discriminatory behavior. And that's essentially what veganism is. You're just adjusting your everyday life, all of your daily habits, the things that you buy, the places you go, as much as you, once again, realistically can, to not
Yeah.
support any form of animal exploitation. So it's not about, telling people who don't know where their next meal is coming from that they shouldn't consume animal products, or telling people who are, living on native land that have to survive off of, killing animals to survive because that's their only source of nutrition and nutrients. And we're not telling, if veganism isn't about telling people in those particular circumstances what they should or shouldn't do. It's about, in your everyday life, if you have options, if you are able to not go to this circus where animals are being exploited, if you are able to go to a Walmart or a grocery store and pick up plant-based milk instead of a cow-based milk or an animal-based milk, you can just make those choices. So
Yeah.
essentially, just like I said, altering your daily habits as much as you realistically and practically can to not support any form of animal exploitation, whether that be through food, through the clothes that you wear, whether it be buying faux leather instead of leather alternative instead of leather made from cows, buying faux fur instead of fur made from foxes and minks and animals in that regard. So like I said, just essentially adjusting your everyday habits as much as you can to not support the exploitation and the abuse of animals.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to talk about having compassion for people who are not in a situation where they can make those choices. And then if you are in a position to fight the systems that don't allow people to make those changes, because not everyone is able to. So I think a big thing is having compassion for other individuals. Um,
Absolutely.
Chris, you're well known for your environmental activism, which people don't always see as a social justice issue. What is the connection for you between animal rights, earth rights, and human rights?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, just like I mentioned previously, initially, I went vegan because I wanted to be a better environmentalist. I didn't realize that by purchasing these products from factory farming companies and I didn't realize all of the harm that I was supporting by purchasing and consuming these products. But all of these systems are intertwined. Like I said earlier, the systems that oppress humans oppress animals, and they also oppress the health of the environment. When we look at where are these factory farms being placed, they're typically in marginalized communities. They're typically in countries that aren't considered, first world countries, and they're destroying the natural environments in these countries and in these communities. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation, and the earth actually heals itself and pull out the toxins in the air through trees and through forests. And we're cutting down all of these trees and all of this natural forest land to essentially raise animals that are producing more toxins in the air, just because we're all, the mammals produce toxins in the air. That's what we do,
Yeah.
just by being a mammal. So we're essentially bringing more harm to the earth by tearing down all of this land to produce food products that are having a negative impact on the earth. So it is all intertwined. When you really look at it and dissect it, you start to see how animal rights intertwines with the health of the environment and how that impacts communities and humans in general. So it's not something that is separated. You know, they are all a part of a bigger puzzle when it comes to fighting against these types of discriminations in oppressive systems.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not mutually exclusive. You know, we can work on fighting them, which leads me to my next question. For viewers who have not heard the term collective liberation, can you please explain what it means and how it applies to animal advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is part of the reason that I started Apex, is because I understand that when activists come into the movement, they just aren't robots. They aren't beings that are completely detached from their historical background, their cultural background, and how they see the world is going to impact how they think about activism, the things that they want to talk about and discuss and also address problematic behavior that we may have in the movement. So when we speak about collective liberation, essentially we approach activism through a lens where we are not going to exclude any other type of oppression in our fight in reaching a world where all individuals are free from harm and suffering. We're going to bring along other species and individuals in our advocacy efforts. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go to every protest for every cause. It just means that, once again, in our everyday lives, we're going to adjust our living and our ways of thinking to not support, as much as practically impossible, any form of oppression. And that's what's going to lead to collective liberation. So how that intertwines with the animal rights movement is that I think we have to understand, once again, when advocates do this work, they have a lot of trauma, they have a lot of experience in dealing with other systems of oppression. And we have to understand that that can be of benefit to us in how we fight against these systems of oppression. So collective liberation just means that we're not going to exclude anyone in our circle of compassion. And as we fight for animals, we have to understand that the fight isn't singular. That may be the focus, that may be what we are all here fighting for, fighting against in this particular instance, but there are other oppressions that we can't ignore, and they also play a role in who gets to advocate in the community, who gets heard in the community, who gets funded in the community. All of these things, all of these systems have to be broken down. So we have to focus on animals and still understand that the fight isn't only limited to non-human animals.
Absolutely. I think you explained that perfectly. And yes, we have to fight all forms of oppression in order to fight just one. If it's animal rights, we have to fight other forms of oppression. We can't reach our goal without doing that. Chris, you talked about your 3 initiatives, No Backyard Slaughter, Global Majority Caucus, and Black Vegan Everything. I'd like to dive deeper into the work you are doing with No Backyard Slaughter. As you stated, No Backyard Slaughter focuses on backyard slaughterhouses located in predominantly BIPOC communities and help communities of color defend themselves against animal industries through community organizing and activism. Why do you believe slaughterhouses plague BIPOC communities more than non-BIPOC communities?
Yeah, that is a great question. And honestly, it's a series of answers that could follow that up. I think one of the things personally that I recognize is that this initiative started because I live 10 minutes from a backyard slaughterhouse. And I have been organizing vigils and protests and all of these different things over the last 3 or 4 years. And I had literally no idea that this slaughterhouse was taking place essentially literally in my backyard. And
Yeah.
I was trying to understand why that was. And these types of situations aren't necessarily magnified in the animal rights movement, because a lot of the people that are fighting against these backyard slaughterhouses or situations similar to that aren't necessarily a part of the movement. So the reason this initiative was very important to me once again was because it was something that was near and dear to my heart and in my community. And we're working with people in the community to help fight against this, because this brings about lowering the property value in communities of color. You having children and community members walk by a slaughterhouse every day. No one wants to live next to a slaughterhouse, even if you are someone that consume animal products. Who actually wants to have a slaughterhouse in their neighborhood, on their street, having to deal with this on an everyday basis? So, and it definitely affects these Black and brown communities in a lot of ways, because one of the things is that a lot of times it's hidden in plain sight. This is a situation that people may not even think much of, but when you talk to people about backyard slaughterhouses, their radars go up. They understand that, wow, this is cruelty and unjust, and it's right in our neighborhood. So, like I said, we're collaborating with community members and hoping to expand this initiative, and who knows where to go. Right now, we're focused on this particular instance, but we have found out about other situations that are somewhat similar, and we're going to hopefully take the information that we've learned from this particular situation and help the next situation and other situations going forward to hopefully better be prepared to fight against these instances.
Yeah, it makes me recall, and I can't think of the name of the film that I recently watched, but they interviewed people from these communities, and miles away, they could smell the waste from the backyard
Probably the smell of money.
slaughterhouses. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is it's just awful, and we have to change that. One of the strategies you use through this initiative is pressure campaigns. What is a pressure campaign, and can you give us some examples of a time that it was used?
Yeah, I'll talk about, actually, we're applying a pressure campaign in this no backyard slaughter house situation, because so I'll talk about what a pressure campaign is first, and then talk about how we're using it. So essentially, it's when you use your efforts and direct them at a particular target or person, and you have a specific ask and a demand that's going to bring about actual change. So for instance, in this no backyard slaughter campaign, we do understand, and this is also an example of the nuance of why collective liberation is important, because although we disagree with what the slaughterhouse worker is doing and the slaughterhouse owner is doing, we understand that there are systems in place that keep Black and brown people oppressed in our society. So we didn't want to just attack the slaughterhouse owner. So what we decided to do was put our efforts on the county and pressure campaign them and apply all of our energy and our work towards making them change the situation, making them hold them accountable to upholding the laws that say this person can't have a slaughterhouse in a residential neighborhood. And since this has been going on for the past 3 or 4 years, the county has kind of brushed it off, and they sent a cease and desist letter to the slaughterhouse owner, but they haven't actually enforced or put any power behind it. So we're putting all of our energy and pressure towards the county and demanding that they actually make the change. So we're sending them emails on a regular basis. We're doing calls and leaving complaints to the commissioners and the CEO of the county. We're protesting outside of the county government building. So all of these efforts where we're doing social media storms and leaving comments on the county website and the county social media pages. So all of our efforts are concerted and aimed at a particular target, asking for a particular outcome and a result. So our pressure campaign is aimed at the county, and what we're asking for is an injunction that will close this slaughterhouse. And also on the opposite end of the spectrum, I'm working on a proposal to possibly help the slaughterhouse transition into a plant-based type of business. So once again, when we talk about that collective liberation, how can we stop this, but still possibly bridge a gap and maybe develop a situation that is beneficial to the community instead of harmful to the community? I think a lot of times in our advocacy, we're just hyper-focused on shutting down and ending this abuse, which we should be. There's nothing wrong with that. But I also think we have to understand the real world applications and the real world results of our actions. And if we could somehow, I can't say the term kill two birds with one stone because that's species language, but feed two birds with one stone. If we could close the slaughterhouse and replace it with something that's beneficial, that's a win-win for everyone. So that's the results. That's why our pressure campaign is aimed at the county and not the individual, and that's how we're going about it.
That makes perfect sense. Can you tell us about your most recent campaign to shut down Bradford's livestock, and how can viewers get involved or help push the campaign along?
Yeah, so that's essentially what we've been talking about with the No Backyard Slaughter campaign. And that location is the first location that we're working on. And you can help and support by going to nobackyardslaughter.com. And there we have 3 quick ways that you can take action. One is sending an email, one is making a phone call, and another one is participating in our social media storm. But essentially, you can take action and go on the website and learn more about the case. You can see the coverage the local news did about the slaughterhouse, and they interviewed the slaughterhouse owner and the community neighbor and the neighbors from the community. And they got everyone's perspective. And you can learn a lot more about the case in more details. And soon we're going to update the website. So it's going to have a lot of the legal documents. It's going to have a history of the slaughterhouse. That it's going to have like a timeline of all of the things that have taken place. And we're going to add unfortunately, a kill count on the website where you can see how many animals are being slaughtered every month. This slaughterhouse averages about 100 animals being killed a month. So we're going to really just put all of the information on the website. But that website is nobackyardslaughter.com for anyone that is interested in learning more and supporting.
Yeah, and I would absolutely encourage our viewers to go there because with the pressure campaign, every voice counts, and you can do that. It's easy. People can do it from their home. They can, send a tweet, send an email, make a phone call. So thank you for putting those systems in place to help people advocate. On the flip side, if someone wants to target a backyard slaughterhouse in their community, would your organization be able to help them with this? And what steps should they take to make it happen?
Yeah, so we definitely have a limited bandwidth. I think right now, the most we can do is kind of consult about how people should go about it. We may not be able to have as much hands-on impact with the people that are fighting in this situation, but we can definitely consult people and tell them what we've learned. And also, there are other people that are doing this work too. We could connect individuals with other individuals. So that's something that we could do. And what was the second part of the question?
Just how that they could get started, which you definitely answered, reaching out and consulting. I think that would certainly be helpful to our viewers.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say one of the things that I was definitely mindful of when I started this was to speak to the people that were already fighting this situation and collaborate with them. That really helped out. I mean, I have years of experience in what I would call traditional animal advocacy, but the people that are actually impacted by the situation, you want to speak to them first. You want to talk to the community members, maybe knock on the neighbors' doors and ask them, okay, what's going on? How long have you all been fighting this? What's been done? I think a lot of times, us as advocates, we may unintentionally try to go into spaces and, kind of lead and take over because we just have that experience. But there were people in the community that were way more well versed than I was about this particular instance, about the efforts that they've been doing. They were already doing a pressure campaign in a sense without even knowing it, without even titling it a pressure campaign. I just kind of came in and added more to it and helped strengthen it. But I would say one of the most important things that you can do is communicate with people that are actually being impacted by the slaughterhouse or that live next to it or those that are already fighting against it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing attention to that. It can also help build community to talk to those people and not just ignore them, because again, we need everyone to help fight this industry. So thank you again for bringing the attention to that very important point. So Apex is a vegan organization, but its advocacy isn't vegan centered. Can you explain why you chose this approach and the potential impact it has on different communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of go back to the point I made earlier when I spoke about how I had been doing advocacy, and specifically I was going to slaughterhouses every other week and bearing witness, which is extremely important. And I think for any advocate that can endure that, I would encourage them to do so. But I wasn't aware of this particular situation in my own neighborhood. So I think it was important for me to touch the soil of what's going on in our local community and get in touch with those community members and find out, how can we assist and we can help in these situations and not just kind of come in and, try to take over their efforts and learn from them. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, not everyone is vegan who's fighting these systems that are impacting them. So
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's why the work that we are doing, we want to reach out to people that aren't like us or have that same framework, because, one of the things that I discovered is that, everyone that isn't vegan, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be an ally in particular instances. Like all of the types of activism that we do is abolitionist. So, if anyone wants to come and support us in our abolitionist work, we invite them to do so. We don't make the work about the particular people. We make the work about the work. It's about achieving this result. It's about achieving a victory for the animals. So oftentimes honestly, I haven't mentioned, as I'm working with the community members, veganism hasn't come up practically at all. And that's part of that is intentional. But part of that is because it's, honestly, it's irrelevant to the work that we're actually doing. The work is to get this slaughterhouse shut down. The work is to help save these animals. So if, someone doesn't share the same philosophy in life with me, it doesn't mean that we can't collaborate. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and most of the world isn't vegan. So I think we have to understand that in order for us to reach the most of the majority of the world, we're going to have to expand our network and and the people we collaborate with, and find out where they can fit in and where we can fit in and how we can collaborate. Because once again, it's only about 1% of the world that's vegan, and I think of that 1%, 1% are activists. So that's a very
Mhm.
small group. And if we want
Yeah.
to make anti-speciesism something that's uh, global, then we're going to have to get out of our comfort zone and, collaborate with some people that we probably aren't traditionally used to collaborating with.
Yeah, and they have a lot to bring to the table as well. So absolutely.
Mhm.
The theme of this year's conference is making connections and taking action for farmed animals. You talked a lot about the importance of making connections between different social justice issues and building community. But could you give our viewers some advice on how they can take action in their own communities and beyond?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I would say one of the ways you can take action in your community is finding out what's going on in your community. Are there organizations that are doing work? Find out, anything on a political or legislative side. You can learn about that a lot more and find your footing. Everything that needs to be done, you may not necessarily be the person to do all of these different things.
Mhm.
Maybe you're more comfortable with doing things online. Maybe you're more comfortable with helping restaurants transition and have more vegan options. There's particular things that we are all better suited to do. So I would say, one, look at what's going on in your neighborhood, and then look at what you like to do, what you prefer to do. Be honest with yourself, because like I said earlier, I went to vigils on a consistent basis and bear witness and saw trucks of thousands of animals before they were being slaughtered, and tried to give them any compassion that I could in their last moments of life. That's not for everyone to do. Everyone
Yeah.
isn't capable of doing that emotionally. So understand that about yourself. Understand that, okay, if I want to be involved in the community, what are my skill sets? What can I do? Maybe you're great at accounting. Maybe you're great at photography. Maybe you're great at admin work. You can get involved in a variety of ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the traditional manner, and it doesn't necessarily have to be you protesting. You could be working on policy. You could be doing a variety of things. So I would just say, look at what's going on in your community and look at your natural skills and try to find a way to merge those two.
I love that piece of advice. We all have strengths and uh, potential for advocating on behalf of farmed animals and people on our planet. So finding that niche that someone can really fit into, I just love that piece of advice. Is there anything else I missed that you would like to touch on today?
I would say, to add on to that last point, I would
Uh-huh.
say uh, make sure that anytime you are doing any type of advocacy work or just in life in general, definitely prioritize your self-care.
Mhm.
And this is what is going to make activism for most people sustainable. We don't need people that are going to do, you know, 20, 30 events in one year and then burn out and never, continue to do that again. We need people that can, maybe do 5 or 10 events sustainably for the rest of their life. So think about your self-care. Think about prioritizing things, or prioritizing your health and your well-being, and then going forward with advocacy work. I've seen so many activists burn out. I've seen so many, I've even experienced burnout.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. It happens. I almost feel like for most activists, it's inevitable, or it's unavoidable. But sometimes you have to burn yourself out to understand your limits. But I will always advocate that people manage their self-care first and foremost. If that means you can't, you know, do, as many events as you would like in a year or in a month span, so be it. The one good thing about the animal rights movement is that there are advocates fighting 24/7 around the clock. Somebody is somewhere is fighting for animals whenever you can. So the burden of liberating all beings and all animals isn't solely on you, but that also doesn't mean that you should just walk away and ignore your responsibility to do something to advocate for animals on some level. So just try to find that fine balance of self-care and advocating in a sustainable way.
It's important. The animals need us, and we can't help them if we don't take care of ourselves first. Chris, it's been wonderful talking with you. Thank you so much for joining us again this year. How can people follow your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a wonder to be here. I hope I'm here again next year. Let's go for three in a row. Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it.
But yeah, people can support by going to apexadvocacy.org. So there you'll find out more about the initiatives that we have. We're a 501c3 organization, so you can make a tax deductible donation there. So that's how you find out about Apex. All of our social media links are there. Everything is Apex_advocacy on all of the social media platforms. So that's how you can contact any of the Apex related content and websites and works. And as far as me, I am Soul_Eubanks. That's SOUL_EUBANKS on all social medias. And I have my own website, souleubanks.com. But they are both all kind of interlinked. So if you find you contact me on one, it'll kind of link to Apex and Apex to Soul. So apexadvocacy.org, and you can contact me through there.
Perfect. And we'll include those links in the notes. Thank you again. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you for being here. We hope you have a good day.
No problem. Thank you all for having me.